Donald Trump Jr. Don, thank you very much for joining us on Breitbart News Daily.
It's my pleasure. Good to be with you guys.
Listen, everybody's talking about the turmoil in the campaign. The numbers in New York look pretty substantial. Ted Cruz's campaign manager saying, "Hey, if you don't get over 50%, you ought to pack it up and go home." How's that? How do you respond to that?
I'd say let's go back and look at Texas. If you can't win your own state by 50%, I mean, if that's the logic, Ted didn't do it in his own state, so it's just. Did he walk in?
Did Jeff Rowe walk into that punch? That's right. The first thing I thought.
You know what?
And by the way, Ted Cruz's victory down there but you guys even admit that it was very impressive, but it was only 47%. It wasn't 50%.
Correct. I mean, listen, I think these guys, and I've been in politics now for all of 3 weeks, but I think everyone's looking for this like great gotcha soundbite that they can run around with, and half the time, no one ever calls them on it. It's a very interesting game, and while I'm new at it, I'm realizing how ridiculous it is. I mean, the only thing that these guys aren't for is for the people that they claim to represent. I mean, these politicians, they're not public servants. They're not working for the people. They're working for themselves. They're working to line their own pockets. It's a pretty pathetic game at this point.
Look, I don't want to get into all the personalities. You got all these articles a day about, restaffing, you got DC office, who's in, who's out. That's all kind of the normal course of business and things like this. What I do have, though, on the Breitbart site and on the show, day in and day out, these are from Trump supporters and probably some of the most diehard Trump supporters. Again and again and again, we hear, hey, these issues of trade, which he's made to the forefront of the American people, this issue of building the wall in Mexico, and now he's come up with a plan of the remittances that has President Obama and the Mexican government their heads blown up, right, about it's going to put in more of the war on ISIS. If he stuck to those issues, that's what we want to hear. We don't want to hear all this other stuff. Is that the big change in the campaign? We understand your father's going to be given 2 or 3 major addresses this week. Is the retooling really a focus back to the core issues and off some of this personal back and forth?
Yeah, no, listen, I think it's time. I mean, everyone said, when he brought up the wall initially, and I mean, he had a plan all along. He knew how he was going to do it. He wasn't going to get into details because, everyone doesn't want to talk about the details. Everyone wants, again, to my point earlier, everyone wants the 2-second soundbite. What will look good on the cover of a magazine, and you need to do it in 3 words or less. But there is detail behind all these things. There is thoughts behind this thing. The Mexican government and the Obama administration are probably losing their minds because, wait a minute, there's a legal way that you could actually do this. And, again, I guess theoretically Mexico doesn't have to pay for it, but I think, you or I as business people, or in at least my case as a businessman, I'd pay $8 to $10 billion to guarantee a stream of, 30 to 50 a year annually, stream of income into my country. So these are all things that have been thought out, and that's what my father's saying. I mean, his priority is jobs. His priority is our military and our veterans, taking care of them. His priorities are our children's education. And I think sometimes the GOP gets mired in so many of these other issues that, in the grand scheme of things, aren't as important in everyone's day-to-day life. And so it is something, there is something to be said about that. I mean, I don't know that it's necessarily a cognizant decision other than, it's just time to get back to the real issues, which are jobs. And my father's the only one in this race who's ever created an actual job, which sort of hard to believe.
Your senior policy advisor, Stephen Miller, actually was on Wolf Blitz and had this brilliant assessment that no one's talked about, that actually, when you listen to what he's saying that Mr. Trump's talking about, when you actually talk about building a wall, it's as much to help Mexico as it is to increase the security of the United States, that this wall will be a defining moment to actually help Mexico.
Well, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, when you think about what's going on, on a human level over there with people, rushing to escape, they're hiring these criminals to try to rush them across the border. They're being held up at gunpoint. There's, all sorts of physical attacks, on a lot of these people. I mean, it's not a good situation. I've spent enough time in South Texas being a big outdoorsman, being a hunter and all that. I've seen it where you just see the stacks of the backpacks just lying on a ranch somewhere. And a friend's place, they found 17 dead bodies on there last year of people trying to make it through. I mean, if you stop some of the incentive, for people to try to do it that way, where they're going through a very arduous process to try to, hike hundreds of miles in many cases to try to get somewhere, and you just create a legal system by which people can do something, like my mom did and like my father's mother did, as immigrants. You create that door. I think there's a way to do this, and it's as much for the benefit of the people going there as it is for us.
Last night we had on our site this, you can't call anything more than a campaign ad from Paul Ryan that his office has now made. Of course, they're denying it, but the same language he used when he said that he wasn't interested in being Speaker of the House. They're waiting for you in Cleveland. Two questions. Number one, do you believe, and can you walk us through the logic? How do you get to the 1237 prior to? And if you don't get to the 1237, are you guys going to have the fight and the toughness to grind it out when Paul Ryan and a lot of other folks are going to be sitting there waiting for you in Cleveland to take this thing from you if you don't get to the 1237?
Well, listen, we're obviously going to fight. That's something that's what we do. I mean, these guys have been setting up this game for a long time. That's why Kasich is in the race, right? I mean, he's in there as a spoiler to make it more difficult to get to those numbers because you're not going to get as many, north of 50% type of wins to make certain states winner take all. Make no mistake. I mean, this is totally a setup by the establishment, right? When they're all of a sudden, their darling is now Ted Cruz because they would rather see a guy like Cruz, who's, by the way, after the 2012 post-mortem that they did, why did we lose the election? Why did we, what are the points that we have to really change on? I mean, Ted Cruz is literally on the wrong side of every conclusion that the GOP had then. But they would rather see him, and frankly, they would rather see Hillary win than my father because they know that my father will change the game. And they have this great little system. They all take care of each other, and everyone works for everyone else. And there's no accountability ever. In terms of big losses, they just keep their great job. They keep doing what they do. It's just a different person in power. Fine, we won't get it this time. Maybe we'll win it in 8 more years or 4 more years. And, they would much rather see that, in my opinion, than have someone in there who will actually change the game and or expose the game for what it is, which is, these guys taking care of themselves, not taking care of the people. I mean, this whole notion when they go around and talk about the politicians being these great public servants, I mean, it's the biggest load of garbage I've ever heard in my life. Again, I truly believe that they would much rather see the status quo maintained with the opposite party in power than actually letting someone in there who will actually make changes for a change.
Last question, and thank you so much for joining us. But last question, they don't think you guys are tough enough. They think, hey, these guys understand business and they understand Wall Street and they understand building hotels around the world. But this is down and dirty politics where as Klein says, the party decides. They think they're going to grind you up. Are the Trumps tough enough? Trump's tough enough to enforce their will on this?
Without question. I mean, I don't think anyone's ever questioned whether my father's tough enough. It's just a question of how badly the game is stacked, right? And right now,
let's assume it's bad. Let's assume it's going to be as badly stacked as you can imagine, and maybe even more so.
We're going to fight it out hard, and it's going to be vicious, and it's going to be brutal.
Donald Trump Jr. Don, thank you very much. Donald Trump Jr. has been our guest. I really appreciate you taking time. I know you're insanely busy. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure, guys. Thank you.